If one sentence could destroy a career, this was it. I used to think I understood office politics inside and out until Bradley showed up. One phrase, 6 words, a conference room gone silent, and then 12 resignation letters landing in senior management's inbox. You think you've seen spectacular corporate implosions? Wait until you hear how a single moment of arrogance brought down the untouchable. This isn't just another tale of workplace revenge. This is the story of how we turned my way or the highway into the most expensive words a manager ever spoke. My name is Natalie Harper, and for 10 years, I'd built my life around Northgate Systems. At 35, I wasn't just the head of delivery, I was the person who knew every crack in our foundation, every shortcut through our labyrinthine processes, and most importantly, every person who made this place actually work. That knowledge would become my weapon, though I didn't know it yet. Northgate had always operated like a well-oiled machine built on trust. We'd weathered 3 major system crashes, 2 hostile takeover attempts, and countless all-nighters fueled by cold pizza and shared determination. My team didn't just respect me. We respected each other. Marcus in QA would catch bugs that saved us millions. Sarah in vendor relations could negotiate contracts that made procurement weep with joy. Greg, our technical lead, could make our ancient legacy systems dance like they were built yesterday. We weren't just colleagues, we were survivors who'd earned our battle scars together. Then came the merger, or as corporate called it, a strategic alliance for synergistic growth, the kind of phrase that makes you reach for your resume. But we'd survived worse, right wrong, because this merger brought Bradley Langston. Bradley arrived on a Monday morning in February, wearing a Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than most of our monthly salaries, slicked back hair, perfect teeth, and a Harvard MBA he mentioned within the first 5 minutes of introduction. He stood in our conference room, surveying us like a general inspecting troops he'd already decided to replace. Velocity over legacy, he announced, projecting his first slide. That's my philosophy. This department has been running on momentum from decisions made 5 years ago. That ends today. I remember exchanging glances with Greg. 5 years ago, we'd rebuilt the entire delivery infrastructure from scratch. It was our pride, our achievement. Bradley had just dismissed it as legacy in his opening statement. The changes started immediately. Our informal Monday morning coffee meetings where we'd hash out the week's challenges, replaced with KPI alignment sessions at 7:30 a.m. sharp. The shared documentation portal we'd spent years perfecting, too complex for agile methodology. The careful vendor relationships Sarah had cultivated, inefficient comfort zones. He installed dashboards everywhere, massive screens showing real-time metrics that no one had asked for and few understood. He spoke in acronyms, OKRs, SMART goals, racy matrices like he was casting spells. Every conversation became a touch point, every problem an opportunity for optimization. But it was the small things that revealed his true nature. He'd rename our projects without consulting anyone. Project Atlas became Velocity Initiative Alpha. He'd schedule meetings during lunch hours, then act surprised when people seemed hungry. He'd send urgent emails at 11:45 p.m. and expect responses by 6 a.m. We need to embrace disruption, he'd say. Standing at the head of conference room tables, he'd had specially ordered because the old ones didn't project authority. Meanwhile, the actual work, the unglamorous, essential work of keeping our systems running was falling apart. I tried to adapt. God knows I tried. I translated his corporate speak for newer team members. I stayed late to maintain the documentation he'd officially discontinued, but we desperately needed. I mediated between his velocity and our reality, but every day, I watched something die in my colleagues' eyes, the spark that made them care, that made them stay late not because they had to, but because they wanted to see something succeed. It was fading. The conference room that had once echoed with laughter and heated but respectful debates now felt like a courtroom. People spoke only when directly asked. They nodded at Bradley's pronouncements. They typed notes they'd never review. They survived. "Are we working for the mission or for Bradley?" Marcus asked me one evening as we watched the sunset from the break room. both of us still at the office at 8 p.m. I didn't have an answer, but I was about to find out exactly what we were all working for. Bradley's true nature emerged slowly, like poison seeping through groundwater. He started cutting what he called redundant processes, the very safeguards that kept our system stable. The documentation portal disappeared overnight, replaced with a lean knowledge base that contained exactly 3 poorly written pages. Our multi-stage testing protocol became rapid validation, which meant pushing code live and praying. The incident reporting system that had saved us from countless disasters was now negative thinking that impedes innovation. But his masterstroke was the nicknames. On the surface, they seemed friendly, almost charming. Sarah became Sunshine because she always tried to stay positive. Marcus was the professor for his meticulous attention to detail. Greg earned Captain for his technical leadership, and me, I was the translator because I tried to make Bradley's corporate gibberish comprehensible to actual humans. These weren't terms of endearment. They were labels, diminishments, ways to reduce us from professionals to caricatures. When Sarah raised concerns about a vendor contract, Bradley would say, "Let's not rain on the parade. Sunshine." When Marcus found critical bugs, it became, "The professor is overthinking again." Every nickname came with a dismissive smile that made my skin crawl. I started noticing the patterns in his manipulation. He'd praise publicly but criticize privately, ensuring no one else witnessed his true feedback. He'd change requirements after work was complete, then question why we couldn't adapt faster. He'd take credit for successes in executive meetings while ensuring failures had our names attached in email trails. The exclusion began subtly. First, I wasn't copied on a vendor negotiation email. Then, a critical architecture meeting happened while I was in a mandatory training session Bradley had scheduled for just me. By the 3rd week, I was learning about major decisions through hallway whispers rather than official channels. "Did you know we're switching our entire API framework?" Greg asked me one Tuesday morning, his face pale. I hadn't known. The decision had been made in a strategic alignment session that happened to occur during my dentist appointment, the one Bradley had insisted I couldn't reschedule because personal health is paramount to velocity. The atmosphere shifted from collaborative to paranoid. People started BCCing personal emails on every communication. Conversations died when Bradley entered rooms. The break room, once filled with brainstorming and laughter, became a silent space where people scrolled their phones and avoided eye contact. I watched Amy from customer success, brilliant, dedicated Amy who'd been with us 3 years, start interviewing elsewhere. She didn't say anything, but I recognized the signs: the sudden dental appointments, the pressed suits on random Wednesdays, the way she'd stopped decorating her desk. When she finally left, Bradley announced it as an opportunity to inject fresh perspective into the role. The fear spread like a virus. People started agreeing with increasingly absurd directives. When Bradley suggested we eliminate our backup systems to encourage confidence in our primary infrastructure, heads nodded around the table. When he proposed cutting our QA timeline from 2 weeks to 2 days because perfection is the enemy of progress, no one objected. I tried to push back diplomatically in a one-on-one meeting. I presented data showing our error rates had tripled since the process changes. Bradley leaned back in his chair, my old chair, actually, which he'd claimed because it projected more authority, and smiled that practiced smile. "Natalie, Natalie, Natalie," he said, using my name like a parent scolding a child. "You're thinking like a manager when you need to think like a leader. These aren't errors. They're learning opportunities. Our stakeholders don't care about perfection. They care about velocity. Our stakeholders care about their data not disappearing." I countered. His smile tightened. "That's exactly the kind of legacy thinking we need to eliminate. I brought you into my inner circle because I thought you could adapt. Was I wrong?" The threat was clear: adapt or leave, conform or be cast out. But his inner circle was a joke, a rotating cast of whoever was currently useful, discarded the moment they showed independent thought. That night, I sat in my car in the parking garage for an hour, engine off, staring at the concrete wall. 10 years of my life, 10 years of building something meaningful. And in just 8 weeks, Bradley had turned it into a fear factory where everyone smiled while drowning. My phone buzzed. A text from Greg. He's looking for friction. Anyone who pushes back gets labeled as resistance. Be careful. But careful wasn't going to save us. Careful was just another word for complicit. The cracks in Bradley's velocity revolution started showing up in places that mattered customer accounts. First, it was small discrepancies, invoice amounts off by pennies, delivery timestamps showing impossible dates, user permissions randomly resetting, but pennies multiplied across thousands of transactions become real money. Impossible dates meant SLA violations. Reset permissions meant security breaches. I documented everything in excruciating detail. The API integration Bradley had fast-tracked without proper testing was corrupting data packets. The streamlined reporting system was actually double-counting transactions, inflating our metrics while destroying our credibility. The backup systems he'd eliminated meant we couldn't even restore clean data when things went wrong. 3 months into Bradley's reign, we lost our first major client, Peninsula Financial, worth $8 million annually. They cited systemic reliability issues in their termination notice. Bradley spun it as strategic account optimization, claiming we deliberately shed low-margin business. Those of us who knew Peninsula had been our highest margin account said nothing. What was the point? I tried one more time to raise the alarm. I compiled a comprehensive report, error logs, customer complaints, financial impact assessments, 20 pages of irrefutable evidence that we were heading for disaster. I scheduled a meeting with Bradley, printed copies for the executive team, and practiced my presentation until I could deliver it in my sleep. Bradley cut me off 3 slides in. "This is exactly the kind of fear-based thinking that's been holding this department back," he said, actually tossing my report into his trash bin. "We're not here to maintain, Natalie. We're here to disrupt. Fail forward, remember. Failing forward assumes we learn from failures." I said, "We're just failing." He stood up, his signal that the meeting was over. "I think you need to decide whether you're part of the solution or part of the problem. Take the afternoon off. Think about your commitment to our velocity vision." The dismissal was clear, but something else happened in that moment. The mask slipped. For just a second, I saw the real Bradley, not the polished executive playing corporate theater, but a man who genuinely didn't care if everything burned as long as he could claim he lit the match. The exodus began quietly. First, David from Data Analytics, 8 years with the company, gone without even a goodbye email. Then Jennifer from Vendor Management, who'd been Sarah's right hand. Then Tom from Infrastructure, who'd literally built half our systems from scratch. They didn't make announcements. They just stopped showing up. Their desk plants the only evidence they'd ever existed. Greg cornered me in the stairwell one Thursday evening. "He's documenting everything we do wrong while hiding his own failures," he whispered, checking over his shoulder. "I saw the files. He's building cases against anyone he sees as a threat." "How do you know?" "Remember that executive coaching session he made me attend? I saw his screen when he stepped out. There's a folder for each of us. Yours is the biggest." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every email I'd sent, every pushback in meetings, every moment of hesitation before agreeing with his insanity, it was all being weaponized against me. But Greg had given me an idea. If Bradley was documenting us, maybe it was time to return the favor. The pattern became clearer as more people left. Bradley wasn't just incompetent. He was strategically destructive. He'd tank projects led by potential threats, then blame the failure on their legacy thinking. He'd assign impossible deadlines to people he wanted gone, then cite missed targets as performance issues. He was manufacturing a paper trail to justify a complete departmental purge. HR's silence was perhaps the most disturbing part. Tara, our HR director who'd always had an open door, suddenly became unavailable. Her assistant scheduled meetings 3 weeks out, then canceled them last minute. Complaints disappeared into a void. Exit interviews were conducted by Bradley himself. A conflict of interest so blatant it would have been laughable if it weren't so sinister. Marcus was the breaking point for many of us. Steady, reliable Marcus, who'd never missed a deadline in 6 years. Bradley assigned him a critical security audit with 3 days' notice, a job that typically took 2 weeks. When Marcus explained the impossibility, Bradley publicly questioned his competence in front of the entire team. "Maybe the professor needs to go back to school," Bradley said, that poisonous smile never wavering. "In the real world, we adapt to market demands." Marcus submitted his resignation that afternoon. No notice period, no transition plan. He just walked out, leaving his company laptop on his desk with a sticky note that read, "Adapted to market demands." By the end of that week, we'd lost 5 more people. The department that had once housed 32 professionals was down to 19, and those who remained were either too scared to leave or secretly interviewing elsewhere. But something else was happening. The survivors started talking, really talking, in hushed conversations in the parking garage, in coded messages on personal phones, in glances that said more than words ever could. We were finding each other in the wreckage, and we were angry. The collapse wasn't coming, it was here. The question was whether Bradley would bury us in it, or whether we'd find a way to make sure he went down instead. I started building my insurance policy the day after Marcus left. A folder on my personal laptop, encrypted and backed up to 3 different cloud services. I named it simply FYI, for your information. Innocent enough if anyone asked, devastating if anyone looked inside. Every email Bradley sent went into the folder. Every system log showing his direct orders that caused failures. Every timestamp proving he'd been informed of critical issues and ignored them. Screenshots of Slack messages where he contradicted himself, sometimes within the same conversation. Meeting recordings where he promised one thing to executives and demanded the opposite from us. The folder grew from megabytes to gigabytes, a digital monument to institutional destruction. But I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was building a network. It started with the new hires, the ones Bradley had brought in to replace our legacy thinkers. They'd arrive bright-eyed and eager, armed with the latest buzzwords and aggressive enthusiasm. Within 2 weeks, that enthusiasm would crack. Within a month, they'd be sending me private messages asking for help. The documentation is gone. Lisa, a new project manager, messaged me at 10:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Bradley said to figure it out myself, but I don't even know what our systems are supposed to do. "Meet me in the south stairwell tomorrow at lunch," I replied. "Bring your personal laptop." These stairwell sessions became my secret university. I'd spend 30 minutes teaching what Bradley had destroyed, sharing the real processes that actually kept things running. No official trail, no company resources, just knowledge passed like contraband in a prison. Lisa, Kevin, Roberto, Anna, they all came seeking truth in a department built on lies. The beautiful irony was that Bradley's own hires became my most valuable allies. They'd been sold a vision of innovation and transformation. Instead, they'd walked into a war zone where their leader was the one dropping bombs. Their disillusionment was swift and complete. He told me I'd be leading cutting-edge development. Kevin confided during one session, "Instead, I'm just cleaning up disasters and pretending they're features." I taught them, but they taught me too. They showed me Bradley's private Slack channels where he mocked the old guard. They forwarded emails where he took credit for their work. They recorded meetings where he promised them promotions that would require firing current staff. Each piece of information went into the FYI folder, carefully cataloged and cross-referenced. Greg became my technical documentation specialist. Every system failure got a detailed post-mortem that Bradley would never see. Sarah tracked vendor complaints that Bradley deleted from the official record. Even people who'd left stayed connected, feeding information from their new positions about how Bradley was spinning their departures to executives. Then came the anonymous email that changed everything. It arrived at 2:17 a.m. on a Sunday, from an address that would self-destruct after one viewing. The subject line read, "You're not his first." Attached was a PDF, 43 pages of documentation from Bradley's previous company, Zenith Technologies. The parallels were eerie, the same velocity over legacy presentations, the same systematic destruction of processes. the same exodus of talent, and the same ending. Zenith's entire technology division collapsed 6 months after Bradley left, taking half the company's value with it. But the last page was the revelation, a memo from Zenith's board of directors, leaked by someone who wanted the truth known. Mr. Langston's departure is voluntary to avoid prolonged legal action. His methods, while initially showing positive metrics, resulted in fundamental operational damage that will require years to repair. The anonymous sender had included a note: "He doesn't destroy systems. He convinces you to destroy them yourself. Then he moves on before the bill comes due. Don't let him do it again." I stared at that note until my eyes burned. This wasn't incompetence or even simple corporate tyranny. This was a pattern, a playbook, a professional methodology of destruction. Bradley was a corporate vulture who fed on the corpses of departments he killed. The FYI folder took on new urgency. I started categorizing everything by legal standards, not just corporate ones: regulatory violations, fiduciary breaches, deliberate misrepresentation to shareholders. I learned more about corporate law in 3 weeks than I had in 10 years of management. My apartment became a war room. Printouts covered my dining table, connected with red string like something out of a conspiracy thriller. Except this wasn't theory. This was documented fact, waiting for the right moment to deploy. The new hires started calling me Professor too, but with genuine respect, not Bradley's condescension. They'd slip me USB drives with data they'd accidentally discovered. They'd CC me on emails using their personal accounts. They became my eyes and ears in meetings I was no longer invited to attend. "He's planning something big," Anna warned me one evening as we pretended to randomly meet at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the office. "There's a board presentation next month. He's going to propose eliminating half the remaining staff to fund what he's calling Velocity 2.0. Do you have proof?" She slid a folder across the table. Draft presentation. He left it on the printer. Inside were slides showing projected cost savings from reducing headcount by 50%, outsourcing core functions to offshore contractors, and eliminating redundant quality controls. The final slide showed Bradley's projected bonus for achieving these efficiencies, $2.3 million. That night, I made copies of everything: physical prints in a safety deposit box, digital copies on encrypted drives, upload links ready to send at a moment's notice. I even mailed a sealed envelope to my attorney with instructions not to open unless something happened to me. Paranoid. Maybe, but I'd learned from Bradley that in corporate warfare, the person with the best documentation wins. And I was about to have documentation that would make his little HR files look like grocery lists. The board presentation was 3 weeks away. Bradley thought he was preparing for his triumph. He had no idea he was actually planning his own funeral. The product launch was supposed to be our redemption. CloudSync, 3.0 18 months of development, $40 million in investment, and promises made to shareholders that this would revolutionize our market position. Bradley had inherited a project that was 90% complete and decided to make it his masterpiece by pushing the launch date forward by 3 weeks. "We need to strike while the market is hot," he announced in the Monday meeting, his eyes gleaming with what I'd come to recognize as dangerous ambition. "Our competitors are sleeping. This is our moment to show them what velocity really means." I felt my stomach drop. 3 weeks might sound like nothing to someone who'd never shipped software, but we needed every one of those days. The vendor APIs were still showing intermittent failures. The load testing wasn't complete. The security audit had red flags we hadn't addressed. Moving the date wasn't ambitious, it was suicidal. "Bradley," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the alarm bells screaming in my head, "the integration with our payment processor isn't stable. We're seeing failure rates of 12% in the testing environment. If that happens in production, then we'll patch it," he interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "That's what hot fixes are for." "Hot fixes are for unexpected issues." I pressed on. "This is a known problem we're choosing to ignore. We could be looking at failed transactions, possibly even data corruption." "Natalie," he said my name like a warning shot. "I understand you're concerned. But concern doesn't ship products. Courage does. Greg tried next. The load balancers aren't configured for the traffic we're expecting. If we get the user numbers marketing is projecting— When, Bradley corrected. When we get those numbers. Because failure isn't in our vocabulary anymore. Sarah raised her hand tentatively. The vendor contracts specify a 2-week notice for traffic increases. If we launch early without informing them, then we'll deal with it when it happens, Bradley said, his patience visibly thinning. This is exactly the kind of overthinking that's been holding this company back for years. The room fell silent. Everyone could feel the tension building like static electricity before a lightning strike. This wasn't a discussion anymore. It was a declaration. I looked around the table at my remaining colleagues. Greg's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching. Sarah was staring at her laptop screen, fingers frozen over the keyboard. The new hires Bradley had brought in looked confused, caught between their trained instinct to agree with the boss and the obvious technical reality that this was insane. I need everyone to understand something, Bradley said. Standing up and walking to the whiteboard, he drew a single line dividing it in 2 halves. On one side, he wrote yesterday, and on the other, tomorrow. Everyone in this room needs to decide which side they're on. Yesterday is comfortable. Yesterday is safe. Yesterday is why our stock price has been flat for 3 years. He turned to face us, marker still in hand like a weapon. Tomorrow is uncertain. Tomorrow is risky. But tomorrow is where fortunes are made. He paused, making eye contact with each of us in turn. When he reached me, he held my gaze longer than the others. So I'll make this simple. We launch in 3 weeks. That's not a request or a suggestion. That's a decision. And if anyone in this room can't commit to that decision, if anyone thinks they know better than the leadership team that brought me here to fix this department, then I need to know that right now. The silence stretched out like a taut wire. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. Because, he continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, there's no room on this team for people who don't believe in our vision. It's my way or the highway. Those are your only options. But the words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. It's my way or the highway. 6 words that stripped away any pretense of collaboration, any illusion of respect, any fiction that we were anything more than expendable resources in Bradley's personal game. I felt something snap inside me. Not break snap into place, like a puzzle piece finally finding where it belonged. 10 years of building, of caring, of believing in something bigger than myself. And it all came down to this moment. This ultimatum from a man who'd been here less than 6 months, who'd never shipped a product, who'd never stayed awake for 72 hours straight debugging code, who'd never had to look a customer in the eye and explain why their trust had been violated. I closed my laptop slowly, deliberately. The soft click echoed in the silent room. Then I'll take the highway, I said, my voice barely above a whisper but carrying more weight than any shout. I stood up, gathered my things with careful precision. My notebook, my pen, my phone. I didn't look at Bradley. I didn't look at anyone. I just walked to the door, opened it, and stepped through. The last thing I heard before the door closed was Bradley's voice, trying to reclaim control. Anyone else want to join her in yesterday? But I was already gone. Walking down the hallway I'd walked 1,000 times. Except this time, I knew I'd never walk it again as an employee. My phone was already buzzing in my pocket, Greg. Sarah, others, but I didn't check it yet. I had a highway to take, and I wasn't going to be taking it alone. I left the building in complete silence. No dramatic goodbye email. No farewell message on Slack. No parting words to the security guard who'd greeted me every morning for a decade. I simply walked out, badge still in my pocket, and drove home in a daze that felt like floating outside my own body. The text started before I even reached my apartment. Greg, are you okay? What just happened? Sarah. Please call me. Lisa. The meeting ended right after you left. Nobody said anything. Bradley just dismissed us. Kevin. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. I didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. I needed to process what had just happened. What I'd just done. 10 years. Gone in 6 words. But as I sat on my couch, still in my work clothes, laptop bag still on my shoulder, I realized something. I felt free. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling Bradley's shadow over every breath. At 8:43 p.m., Greg called. I finally answered. "Natalie," he said without preamble, "I'm done too." "Greg, don't. I already sent it. My resignation. Effective immediately." His voice was steady, resolved. "I've got 3 months of savings and a spine that still works. I'm not staying to watch him destroy everything we built." "This is exactly what he wants," I said, even though part of me was relieved. "He wants the old guard gone. Then he can have it, but he's going to learn what happens when the people who actually know how things work all leave at once." By 10 p.m., my phone was a symphony of notifications. Sarah had resigned. Marcus's entire remaining QA team, 3 people who'd survived the first purge, submitted their notices together. Jennifer from infrastructure, Paolo from customer success, even Anna, one of Bradley's own hires, sent her resignation from her personal email with a note. "I came here to build something. I'm leaving because someone taught me what building really means. Thank you for the stairwell sessions." By midnight, the count was at 12. I opened my laptop and logged into my personal email. There they were, copies of resignation letters, each person CCing me like I was somehow still their manager, still someone who needed to know. Some were professional and brief, others were detailed catalogs of grievances. Greg's was just 2 sentences. "I resign effective immediately. It's been an honor serving with the real team." Roberto's resignation included a postscript. "Natalie didn't ask anyone to do this. We're leaving because staying means becoming complicit in the destruction of something worthwhile." My phone rang again, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe. Natalie. It was Tara from HR, calling from her personal phone. "I'm not supposed to be talking to you, but I need you to know something. 12 resignations in one day. That's not a staffing issue anymore. That's a crisis that goes straight to the board." "Tara, I know you didn't orchestrate this. That's what makes it worse for Bradley. This isn't rebellion. It's abandonment. The board is asking questions he can't answer with buzzwords." She paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. "There's going to be an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Bradley doesn't know yet. The CEO is flying in from Boston tonight. Natalie, do you still have that documentation you tried to show Bradley? The error logs, the customer complaints?" My pulse quickened. "Why?" "Because someone needs to see it. Someone who actually cares about this company's future. Can you send it to me tonight unofficially?" I thought about the FYI folder. Gigabytes of evidence waiting to be deployed. "I'll do better than that. Check your personal email in an hour." I spent the next 55 minutes crafting the most important email of my career. Not to Tara, that would come later, but to the 12 people who'd just bet their careers on principle. The subject line was simple: "Thank you." The body read, "You didn't follow me. You followed your own integrity. Each of you made an individual choice to refuse to be complicit in the dismantling of something meaningful. That takes courage. I didn't know still existed in corporate America." I don't know what comes next for any of us, but I know this: we left on our own terms. We chose the highway over surrendering our principles, and sometimes that's the only victory that matters. Tomorrow, Bradley will spin this as clearing out the deadwood. Let him. We know the truth. The people who actually built and maintained the systems he's claiming to revolutionize are gone. Let's see how much velocity he can achieve when there's no one left who knows how to start the engine. Stay in touch. Something tells me this story isn't over. I hit send, then opened a new message to Tara. Attached was everything the FYI folder compressed into a single, damning file: error logs, failed customer interactions, security vulnerabilities, vendor complaints, financial projections based on false data, and the crown jewel, the PDF about Bradley's history at Zenith Technologies. The subject line: "The real cost of velocity." At 1:14 a.m., as I finally changed out of my work clothes for the last time, my phone buzzed with one final text. It was from Lisa. the newest of the new hires. 13. I just sent mine too. He said it was his way or the highway. Turns out the highway is where all the good people are. I smiled for the first time all day. Bradley wanted to move fast and break things. He was about to learn what happens when the things that break are the people holding everything together. The call from Tara came at 7:22 a.m. the next morning. "The board is in full crisis mode," she said without preamble. The CEO walked into a war room at 6 a.m., 13 resignations overnight, including every single person who understood the legacy systems. The CloudSync launch is in 3 weeks, and there's literally no one left who knows how to deploy it. I poured myself coffee, trying to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. That sounds like Bradley's problem to solve. He's all about velocity, right? Natalie, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you is completely off the record. I could lose my job for this. Go on. The board has launched an internal audit, not just of the department of Bradley specifically. Your documentation started it, but they're going much deeper. They've hired an external firm to review everything, every decision, every email, every metric he's reported. I set down my coffee cup carefully. How deep? They're pulling security footage. They're reviewing badge access logs. They're interviewing the people who resigned. Natalie, they found something in the financial reports. The numbers Bradley's been showing the board don't match the actual system data. He's been manipulating the dashboards. Of course he had. The dashboards nobody understood except the people who just left. There's more. Tara continued. Remember Peninsula Financial? The client we lost. They're considering legal action. They're claiming breach of contract due to the system failures. Bradley told the board they left for competitive pricing, but Peninsula sent a formal complaint letter that he never forwarded to legal. My mind raced. This wasn't just incompetence anymore. This was potential fraud. The CEO wants to talk to you. Tara said, unofficially, off-site, today if possible. I don't work there anymore, remember? Which is exactly why he can talk to you freely, Natalie. He used the phrase whistleblower protections. This is serious. I agreed to meet Richard Morrison, our CEO, at a coffee shop downtown at 2 p.m. I'd seen him maybe 5 times in my 10 years at the company, always at all-hands meetings where he seemed like a distant figurehead. But when he walked in, I saw something I'd never seen before, genuine panic. 13 people, he said, sitting down heavily. 13 critical people gone overnight. Do you know what the board asked me this morning? They asked how one person could destroy an entire department in 6 months without anyone noticing. People noticed, I said quietly. People tried to warn you. He had the grace to look ashamed. I know. I've seen your emails now. The ones Bradley intercepted and never forwarded. I've seen Greg's concerns, Sarah's vendor warnings, the security alerts from Marcus that Bradley classified as pessimistic projections. Richard pulled out a tablet, showing me a graph. This is what Bradley showed us last week. Record efficiency, costs down 30%, productivity up 45%. He swiped to another screen. This is what the audit found. Actual efficiency down 60%. Costs temporarily down because he stopped paying for critical services. Productivity measured by his made-up metrics that don't correlate to any real business outcomes. Why are you showing me this? Because I need to know how bad it really is. The board is meeting tomorrow to decide Bradley's fate. But more importantly, to figure out if we can even launch CloudSync. We have contracts, obligations. If we delay, it could trigger penalty clauses worth millions. I thought about all the nights we'd worked on CloudSync, all the careful planning Bradley had destroyed. You can't launch in 3 weeks, not with the current team. The people who understood the deployment pipeline are gone. The ones Bradley brought in are good people, but they don't know our infrastructure. Could you fix it? I almost laughed. I don't work for you anymore. But could you, if you came back, brought the others back, could you save the launch? That's not the question you should be asking, I said, leaning forward. The question is whether Bradley will still be there tomorrow, because not one of those 13 people will come back while he's in the building. Richard nodded slowly. The board meeting is at 9 a.m. tomorrow. By noon, we'll have a decision. And if he's gone, then I'll be calling you at 12:01 to beg. That evening, my phone became a confessional. People still at the company. People too scared to leave but desperate to contribute to Bradley's downfall. Sent me everything. Screenshots of him taking credit for other people's work. Recordings of him promising promotions that required firing current staff. A particularly damning email where he explicitly told someone to hide system failures from the board review. But the most interesting message came from an unexpected source, Bradley's executive assistant, Margaret, who'd been with the company for 20 years. "I've watched 7 department heads in my time," she wrote. "Good ones, bad ones, incompetent ones, but I've never seen anything like this. He's not trying to build anything. He's just trying to destroy enough to make rebuilding look like innovation. I thought you should know I've been documenting everything too. Every meeting he took, every call he made, every time he asked me to alter meeting minutes. It's all yours if you need it." I forwarded everything to Tara, who confirmed she was adding it to the audit file. The investigation that had started as a response to mass resignations was turning into something much bigger, a complete excavation of how one person had weaponized corporate politics to destroy a functioning department. At 11:47 p.m., Greg texted our group chat. "Anyone else unable to sleep? This feels like Christmas Eve, if Santa was coming to fire someone." Sarah replied, "I've had 3 recruiters call me today. Word is already out that Northgate's entire delivery team is available." Roberto added, "My LinkedIn is blowing up. Funny how resigned on principle from toxic leadership is apparently a selling point now." I typed back, "Whatever happens tomorrow, we did the right thing. We chose integrity over comfort. That's rare enough to be valuable." Lisa, the youngest of our group, sent the last message of the night. "Do you think he knows Bradley? Do you think he's lying awake realizing what's about to happen?" I thought about it before responding. No, people like Bradley never see it coming. They're too busy believing their own performance to notice the stage is collapsing. Tomorrow would bring either vindication or the final death of what we'd built. Either way, 13 people had stood up and said, "Enough," in corporate America. That was its own form of revolution. Bradley walked into the office at 8:15 a.m. that Thursday morning, same as always, venti cold brew in hand, Tom Ford suit pressed to perfection, that practice smile ready to deploy. He had no idea that the board had been meeting about him since 7 a.m. He had no idea that his entire kingdom had already fallen. I know this because Margaret, his executive assistant, texted me play-by-play updates from her desk. He just asked me to schedule his usual 9 a.m. velocity sync. I told him it was canceled. He asked why. I said, "You'll find out. First time I've seen him speechless." At 9:20 a.m., Tara walked to Bradley's office with 2 security guards and a banker's box. The entire floor watched through the glass walls as she handed him a single sheet of paper. His termination, effective immediately. He tried to argue, Margaret reported. Said he needed time to transition his projects. Tara just pointed at the security guards. "He's being escorted out now." I was sitting in the coffee shop across the street, laptop open, watching the building entrance. At 9:37 a.m., I saw him emerge, flanked by security, carrying that pathetic banker's box that held 6 months of his revolutionary leadership. He still had the cold brew in his other hand, but his perfect smile was gone. Greg was sitting next to me. We watched in silence as Bradley stood on the sidewalk, seemingly unsure where to go. His company Tesla was in the executive parking garage, but his keycard wouldn't work anymore. He had to call an Uber. Standing there in his expensive suit with his box of meaningless possessions, just another failed executive waiting for a ride. "You know what the saddest part is?" Greg said quietly. "He'll land somewhere else in 3 months. Update his LinkedIn to say he successfully transformed organizational structure at Northgate Systems, and some other company will hire him to do the same thing." At 12:01 p.m., exactly as promised, Richard Morrison called me. "Bradley Langston no longer works for Northgate Systems." he said without preamble. "The board has authorized me to offer you your position back, with a 20% raise and the title of Senior Vice President of Delivery Operations. Full autonomy to rebuild the department as you see fit." And the others? Anyone who resigned in the last week has a standing offer to return at their previous salary, plus 10%. We're also offering signing bonuses equivalent to 1 month's salary as an apology for what they endured. I need to discuss it with them. Natalie, we need an answer by tomorrow. The CloudSync launch will be delayed by 6 weeks. I interrupted. That's non-negotiable. We'll need that time to stabilize the systems Bradley destroyed and properly test everything he rushed. The penalty clauses will cost less than launching a broken product. There was a pause. You've thought this through. I've had 6 months to think it through. That evening, all 13 of us met at Greg's house. We sat around his dining room table, the same table where we'd once planned product launches and celebrated successes back when work felt like building something meaningful. We could walk away, Sarah said. All of us have other offers. We could leave Northgate to deal with its own mess. We could. I agreed. But CloudSync is our baby. We built it. Do we really want to see it fail because of Bradley? Lisa, the youngest among us, raised her hand like we were in a classroom. What if we go back and he's just replaced by another Bradley? Then we leave again, Roberto said simply. But this time, they'll know we can. That's power. We voted, unanimous. We'd return, but on our terms, contract clauses protecting us from future Bradleys, direct reporting lines to the CEO for critical issues, and most importantly, a voice in hiring any future leadership. The next morning, we walked back into Northgate Systems together. The same security guard who'd watched me leave in silence now smiled broadly. Welcome back, Miss Harper. Welcome back, all of you. The department was a ghost town, empty desks, dark monitors, abandoned projects, but there, in the middle of it all, was a single post-it note on Bradley's old office door. Someone had written just one word, Godspeed. I turned to the team, my team, the real team. 6 weeks to save CloudSync. Who's ready to show them what actual velocity looks like? The cheer that went up could probably be heard in Bradley's Uber, wherever he was heading. 3 months later, CloudSync launched flawlessly. No data corruption, no system failures, no customer complaints. The board called it a miracle. The tech press called it a comeback story. We called it Tuesday, just another day of doing the job right. Bradley updated his LinkedIn to say he'd successfully implemented transformation initiatives at Northgate. He never mentioned the 13 resignations, the board investigation, or his termination. Last I heard, he was interviewing at another tech company, promising to bring his velocity over legacy philosophy to their engineering department. I thought about warning them. Then I remembered some lessons have to be learned the hard way, and sometimes the highway really is the better choice. But here's what Bradley never understood, what people like him never understand. You can't build velocity by destroying the engine. You can't create innovation by silencing experience. And you definitely can't lead people who've discovered they have the power to simply walk away. We didn't just take the highway, we turned it into a 12-lane interstate, and Bradley's career was the roadkill. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate karma and standing up for what's right. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own experiences with toxic leadership. Have you ever had your own my way or the highway moment? Let me know in the comments. Your stories inspire mine.